All right. So, hi, good afternoon, good evening, everyone. Thank you to another session with the HP executives. Thank you for joining. So, today we have got Mr. Cedric Bandoh joining us. Unfortunately, Mr. Tunde Agoke has other commitments and will not be able to join us this evening. So he sent his apologies. I'm just going to try to introduce Mr. Cedric Bandoh. He is the strategy and operations leader. He is the supply chain operation leader for HP's advanced computer solution businesses, responsible for delivering manufacturing excellence for workstations, retail, and industry solutions. He has a lot of experience, and I'm sure he is going to give us a great session today on time management. So, welcome, Cedric. Thank you for giving us your time, and we look forward to having an interesting session with you today.
Thank you very much, Fatima. I appreciate the warm introduction and the warm welcome. I'm very excited to be here with everyone this today, depending on where you are in the world. And I appreciate you taking the time to hear the presentation. I'm going to bring up my slides here, and hopefully everybody will be able to see them. Let's.
Yeah, I can see it. Time management and prioritization. Yeah.
Okay. Can you see the full slides, or do you see any notes?
Um, they're like two. One is like the title slide, I suppose, and then there's another one by the side.
Yes, we
Okay.
can
Um,
see, basically we can see your notes.
Oh, okay.
Now it's good. Perfect.
Okay. Perfect. Good deal. Um, It looks like some folks are still coming in. Do y'all have the ability on your end to let them into the Teams meeting? Or
Yes.
okay,
Yes.
perfect. Because I see the alert, but since I'm in presentation mode, I can't admit them
I
in.
right.
will
Okay,
do it. Don't
Yeah.
worry.
perfect, perfect. Well, again, thank you all so much for having me. Again, my name is Cedric Bandoh. I am the Director of Supply Chain Product Lifecycle Management for HP's Advanced Compute Solutions business. So I lead a team of supply chain program managers and manufacturing professionals who are responsible for launching the products in our business at our factories around the world. And so these products are HP's workstations, computers. These are compute devices that are used for data scientists, engineers, architects, whereby they require a high amount of compute. And then my team also does product launch for our retail products, products that are used in retail store environments. And that's to support our customers around the world. And so, very exciting time in supply chain. And it's exciting to lead some of HP's more advanced products into our factory network around the world. Before I go into today's topic about time management and prioritization, I wanted to share a little bit more about myself. And so I'm a first generation American. I live in Texas, in Houston, Texas. My parents immigrated from Ghana in West Africa and raised me with many, many great lessons from their upbringing in Ghana. I actually lived there for almost 2 years with my grandmother, my late grandmother, when I was born. I'm the oldest in my family, and in our culture, the oldest child also always gets some, let's say, additional responsibilities. And so I very much carry all those amazing lessons from my grandmother, my parents, and our culture with me as a leader here at HP. I've been in the technology industry for a little bit over a decade. I've worked in product management roles, operations roles, and strategy roles. But I've also had the great opportunity to lead our internship program here at the Houston office and to participate in university recruiting efforts. I oftentimes joke if I didn't go to business school twice, I have two business degrees, I likely would have become a teacher because I have a passion for education and giving back to the next generation. And a lot of that comes from the teachers and educators who poured into me when I was going through school. and see it as my obligation to do the same for the next generation. So I thank you all for what you do as educators, what you do to help shape the future of our world, and what you do to pour into your students and the educators that you get to work with. Because I've been a beneficiary of that, and I know I definitely wouldn't be standing here today before you if it wasn't for the amazing educators that I've had in my life. So thank you. So with that, we're going to talk about time management and prioritization today. There are three tools and techniques that I want to offer that I have found to be very effective in my own time management of my own personal life, my professional life, and particularly as a global leader. I have a team of supply chain professionals from Colorado here in the US all the way to Taipei in Taiwan and many points in between. And so time management is something that's very critical for me because leading across multiple time zones can be very challenging if you don't have the right techniques in place. And so I'm going to share a little bit of those. Um, I'm happy to answer questions as they come up, but we definitely will save time at the very end for folks to ask any questions about the content that I present or anything about my background or technology or what it's like working at HP or how to work with students. I'm happy to answer questions on those topics and more. So let's go ahead and dive in. Oh, was there a question already?
No, I think you can go ahead. We'll save the questions to the end, or they can type it in the chat.
Okay, perfect. Okay, so before we get into the specific tools and techniques, there are a few quotes that I want to start off with to help kind of ground our thinking on this topic. And the first quote here, dealing with time management, comes from a business consultant and author, um, Idowu uh, Koyunikan, which in one of his books, he said that time management is about life management. And I think it's really important to start here before going into specific tools and techniques. Because when I think about time management, I first think about how do I achieve work and life integration? Oftentimes we talk about this balance between work and life, but with the acceleration of technology, everybody's seeming to be more busy these days. To me, time management has increasingly become how do I find the integration between work and life? And how do I ensure that I avoid burnout so I can make better decisions and achieve the things that I set out to do, whether it be for my personal life or my professional career. And so this is something that's always stuck with me, and I think it's important to kind of start here. It's more about life and managing our overall life and all the goals and aspirations we have, more so than it is about managing a clock or managing a schedule. So that's the first thing that I'll offer to you and ask you to ponder. And then the second quote, as we think about prioritization, comes from the noted author and speaker and businessman who wrote a pretty popular book that you may have heard about called The Seven Habits of Highly Effective People, Stephen Covey. And he said that the key is not to prioritize what's on your schedule, but to schedule your priorities. So when I think about this quote from Stephen Covey, what I think about is that we are in control. It's not our devices or other people or schedules that are put before us. It is truly us that is in control of our destiny. So as we think about time management and prioritizing work, I think this quote is one that really helps ground the thinking and the approach that one may take to get better at in this particular area. And then the other thing I think about when I've seen this quote many times is starting with the end in mind when it comes to managing time effectively and spending time on what's important, not just what's urgent. And I think as we get more and more busy in life in general, and with so much information constantly coming at us, whether it be through email or social media or other forms of information, what tends to be urgent, it can drive our behavior and our decision making. And I think this quote and the techniques we'll talk about really help to recenter us to focus on spending time on what's important. So two quotes there to kind of help get us grounded. And now I want to offer you the three um, methods, tools, systems that I have found to be very effective as a business leader, and that I've also found to be effective for those that I get a chance to lead, those that I've had a chance to mentor, and students that I've had an opportunity to recruit or interact with over the years. So, and some of these tools you may have heard of before, so they may be a repeat with some of my perspectives. Some of them may be new to you, but ultimately, I hope there are tools and methodologies that are effective. Okay, so the first one is called the Eisenhower method, and it uses this kind of four-box matrix to help um, us organize the ever-growing long list of tasks that we have in our life, whether it be personal task or professional task. And it puts them kind of on this grid to help us make sense and organize all the various tasks. So if you look on the left-hand side of the box here, you have a category of whether or not the task is important or not important. And then over the top, you have whether a task or something that's before you is urgent or not urgent. And then you essentially group those into these kind of four areas. And based off of those groupings, it helps you determine whether what type of action to take after grouping them. So, for example, starting at the top left, um, these are tasks that are important and are also urgent. And then these are the tasks that you want to do and you want to get them done first. And these are typically tasks that have deadlines or pretty significant consequences associated with those tasks. There's a couple examples here on the slide. You know, it could be finishing a project, submitting a draft for somebody else to review, responding to kind of urgent emails from some of your key stakeholders, or personal things like picking up a sick kid from school or tending to, something, a need from a parent. These are things that are important and urgent, and we should prioritize our task around those items first. The second bucket, if we move to the right, is things that are also important. So they have our attention, but they may not be as urgent in the moment, or they don't have necessarily a clear deadline, but they do contribute to our long term success. So these are things like professional development activities. And I know as educators, you get a lot of professional development in the course of your work. Building your network, growing your network, getting people who have a variety of different skills that you can learn from, or even personal things like exercising, which is something that I've been taking a lot of personal time with in the past year to stay fit. All these are things that are very important for our overall success and well-being, but they may not be something that's super urgent that we have to do at the beginning of every single day. And so the best thing to do with these set of activities is to schedule it. And I'll probably touch on scheduling a couple more times before we go to questions. But I know for me as a business leader, I live by my schedule. I schedule life. My calendar, really helps to guide the actions that I take on a day-to-day basis. And for example, exercise, which is on this list, that's on my schedule, and nothing can come and um, interrupt that particular part of my schedule. But I've scheduled it to make sure that I get it done because it's important, but it's not necessarily super urgent. In terms of the things that I need to do on a day-to-day basis. So as we move down here, then you get into the kind of the next category of things that are not important but have a certain level of urgency. So the first one are not important but urgent. These are tasks that you have to get done, but maybe it's not in an area where you have strength. Somebody else or some other tool might be better at completing that particular task. And so these are things that you want to delegate to somebody else or to some other system. You want to keep visibility to them on your schedule, or you want to keep visibility or connected to it, particularly if you're delegating it to somebody else. But it's these are things that you recognize. I wasn't put on this earth to be great at this. I accept that, and then I give it to somebody else who can, or to some other system who can. But I stay connected with it. I delegate, and then finally, um, there are tasks that fill us with distraction on a day-to-day basis. They're not important and they're not urgent. They may play a role in our lives from time to time, but they shouldn't consume most of a schedule or most of the tasks that we do. There's some examples here: social media, watching TV, eating junk food. The next principle that we're going to talk about here, I take these categories and I put them into. We're going to talk about the Pareto principle soon. There's room for this in our lives, but it shouldn't be the overwhelming majority of how we spend our time in our task. And so, this kind of mental model, this framework, is something that I've used and I found to be effective, particularly when I am loaded with a bunch of things that I need to get done at a particular moment, or if I have members of my team who are struggling with um, prioritizing the things that they need to get done. I oftentimes will go back to this simple yet effective method to help them focus their work, their task, or the things that are maybe bringing them anxiety or stress, to help them, point their energies into that first left bucket, the do it bucket, if not the do it and the schedule it bucket. So that's the Eisenhower method. Pretty straightforward, but really tangible in terms of finding an effective way to organize everything. So the second one that I want to offer to you is the Pareto principle. And I put in this order intentionally. I think once you're able to organize those tasks, particularly those do it and schedule it tasks, then you have to apply the kind of the next layer of prioritization. And I think the Pareto principle is a good way to do that. And the Pareto principle first really helps us in our mind think about the work that we have before us in the context of effort. How much effort is it going to take? As humans, we're naturally wired to think about the result. What result am I going to get? What result am I going to get? And the result's important, but how we get to that result is what makes for a much more effective outcome in the end. And so, what the Pareto principle essentially, or the 80-20 rule, is the other way that it's oftentimes referred to, is basically saying that 20% of the time invested in a set of activities often accounts for 80% of the result. And so, one should focus on the set of those 20 things, those really kind of key critical activities that actually drive 80% of the results. Um, and other examples of this in business could be that 20% of a company's customers represent 80% of the company's revenue. So the company is going to drive focus on the 20% of those customers because they know that it's going to impact about 80% of the revenue, which is pretty significant. And so another technique, once you have all those tasks organized, to say which one of these are actually going to lead to the most of the outcomes that we desire for this team, for this student, for this task or this initiative that we have. And that way, it allows the team to stay hyper focused on the things that ultimately matter. And it's ultimately about driving a smaller number of key activities to often produce the majority of the results versus working on a large number of activities that don't really necessarily impact the greater purpose that one's trying to achieve. And so 80-20 is also how, even personally, just as an aside, that I've tried to live my life when it comes to just even staying fit and healthy. So I said 80% of the time, I'll eat healthy. And then 20% of the time, I'll have some snacks or some junk food because we have to live a little bit. So there are some things, going to the previous slide, that you can also throw into that 20% bucket because we are human at the end of the day. And then the final method or principle that I want to offer in terms of managing time and prioritization is something called the Pomodoro technique. And once you have a set of tasks that you've identified, that you've prioritized, and you said, these are the things I'm going to focus on, then it becomes a matter of how do you apply the right level of time to that particular task that you prioritized. So I think the Pomodoro technique is a really, good approach to that allows that particular task to be something that doesn't seem insurmountable. It seems like something that's achievable. So what the Pomodoro technique basically does is it breaks a task into smaller, manageable tasks or into time blocks. And essentially, what you do is you work in 25-minute time blocks. You work for 25 minutes, you take a 5-minute break. Work for another 25 minutes, then take a 5-minute break on the task. And the idea is that after you complete 4 of those 25-minute uh, work blocks followed by a 5 minute break. Then you take a longer 30-minute break. And then, as you can see here in the graphic, the full kind of Pomodoro is usually about 2.5 hours. And there's been research done on this, and it's been shown to be a pretty effective technique in terms of alternating between focused and concentrated work and then some rest. It allows the brain to kind of maintain a certain level of balance such that one is more effective, or it leads to a much more effective outcome or completion of the task. um, and I've been in situations where I've work without taking a step, but without stepping away or taking a step back and looking at the work. And I've gone back and said, you know what, I got the thing done, but it probably wasn't my best work product. And so the Pomodoro technique allows, and I use this often, me to say, okay, I'm going to work on a piece of it, get some fresh air, get a cup of tea, do something, come back to it. And during that break, I may come up with, a better way to phrase something or a better approach to this task that I'm working on. I may chat with somebody in that break and they may give me some perspective that I didn't think about that I can then go back and make my work product even better. So I think this is an effective technique, especially when you're introducing kind of brand new topics, or you're doing training or development. Um, when I led the internship program and I would teach the orientation class to our interns, I would use this technique in terms of building in breaks. And I found that those breaks oftentimes allowed all of us that were in that space time to process what we just learned or what we just worked on prior to the break. And then the information oftentimes actually stuck to people's minds because they had the ability and the time to actually process, which is what I think the Pomodoro technique is essentially allowing us to get to. Now, I think in addition to the Pomodoro technique, there are tools and systems that you can use technology to help actually apply this and the Eisenhower method and the 80-20 principle or the Pareto principle. And some of the things that I do is for my own work calendar and personal calendar, I categorize all of the different tasks and the work that I do into a variety of categories. I sit down and say, how do I want to divide my work in my day? I have some, for example, one-on-one time with my employees. I have some professional development time. I have some strategy time. Um, I have, certain categories of meetings with different stakeholder groups. And so every time I schedule a meeting or a task on my calendar, or every single time I receive a calendar request or a meeting, I then throw those, tasks or those meetings into one of those categories. And it allows me every day to kind of see how my day is spread out across those different categories. And then each of those categories, I color code them. So I can also see on my calendar, wow, am I spending a lot of time, you know, in strategy meetings? Maybe I need to spend a little bit more time with one-on-ones with my team. And those visual cues and those colors have helped me kind of manage my time. And it also helps me understand, am I using my time most effectively? Do I have too much of the one thing that I could delegate to somebody else? Or do I need to shift my day so I can be a much more effective team player or a much more effective leader for my team? And then the other thing that I suggest as you implement the Pomodoro technique, either on a calendar or whatever system works for you, is taking time to routinely review how you're spending your time and make adjustments. So I'll try at the end of every month to say, okay, let me take a look back on the month of October. How did it go? Did I feel like I got a lot of things done in certain areas? Did I feel like I have some gaps in some other areas? And if that's the case, maybe it's time for me to adjust. Or did I find myself doing work in a category that I didn't previously have? So is it time for me to add a new category or a new color code to my calendar and start tracking time for that? And it's amazing when you go back and look at the data, and various calendaring tools will give you reports and data to show you how you're using your time. And it becomes an eye opener of, okay, I'm really effective in one area, or maybe I'm not effective in another area. And then the final thing on this topic that I do around implementing these techniques into a piece of technology is to say, within the meetings or the tools that I'm using, are there ways that I can use other forms of technology to be more efficient? So the tool that we're using right now, Microsoft Teams, has some great um, AI capabilities. And so oftentimes what I find myself, a situation I find myself in is being in multiple meetings at one time, or not being able to go to something where I'm double or triple booked. But the great thing about the technology and tools we have today is that I don't have to be in the room. The meeting can be recorded. The AI will transcribe what was said during the meeting, and then it will summarize those meetings and send it out to everybody. So then what I've done is started to block out time to say, if I wasn't able to make, a series of meetings, or go to a series of conversations today, let me block out maybe 30 minutes and let me go back and read the transcripts so I can be up to date. And therefore I can follow up with individuals whereby I may have missed a conversation or missed a meeting with them earlier in the day. So there's so many different tools like that. Teams has a great way to manage that. And there's a lot more time management and prioritization tools and techniques that are out there. But I find that these are some of the three most effective that have worked for me, whether it be personally, in a team setting, if I'm leading folks, or if I'm working with students in a setting or giving them advice. These tools have been effective over time, and hopefully you find some value in them and may consider implementing them in your own life or in your own environment. So with that, I think that was my last slide. I will pause there and take this time to answer any questions that folks may have.
Thank you so much, Cedric. We picked up a lot of ideas. Thank you for sharing your time and your expertise with us. Like you said, you can unmute and ask him questions directly, or if you would rather type it into the chat and he will answer your questions.
Thank you. Looks like I see a question from, is it Aziz Ojoro?
All right. Yeah,
May I
he's raised
speak?
his hand. Yes, you may.
May
Go
I
ahead,
speak?
Aziz. Yes, go ahead.
All right. First, I want to say a very big thank you to HP and 1 million teachers for giving us this privilege. So let me just, that was a wonderful presentation. Thank you so much, Mr. Seb. Now, my question goes, have you ever been overwhelmed such that you have a lot of tasks that seem to be very, very urgent? So which of the time management tools or strategies will you prefer out of these three when you have certain set of tasks that seem to be very urgent and important? So many of them, let's say up to like 5, I have to get them done very fast. So which of the three um, time management strategies will you prefer out of the ones that you elaborated on? Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Aziz. That's a great question, and I appreciate your comments as well. Um, yes, to answer your question, there are many moments these days. It seems like on a weekly basis where I feel overwhelmed with many tasks that are before me that feel urgent, and I have to get them all done at once. But there's not enough time, or I'm trying to figure out how I'm going to use the time that I have to get it all done. So, to your question about which techniques, I think I usually oftentimes start off with the Eisenhower method. The first one where we talked about task and assessing whether or not they're important and/or urgent. But I think inherent in that, to your question about where everything seems to be urgent, I
I was
oftentimes
feeling
think
like
about which one
when
of
I'm
these
standing
five.
in the real
Uh-oh,
swimming pool. There behind me is the defense.
I think somebody
I just fell
said
down
on mute.
and I didn't know how to swim. You teach me.
Like
Uh,
I think it's Margot. Oh,
okay, I went ahead and hit mute. Sorry for that person. I just I heard got some
yeah,
feedback
yeah,
there.
yeah, yeah. Go ahead.
Okay. Um, but to your question, Aziz, what I oftentimes think about when I'm trying to assess the urgency of things is I say, which ones will have the biggest consequences? And oftentimes when you ask yourself that question, something may seem urgent in the moment, but by working on it, what level of consequence will it lead to? Will it lead to somebody being impacted? There's like a range from everything from, is it life or death, or is it something that, um, if I do it tomorrow, you know, everything's going to be okay in the world, or everything's going to be okay in the organization. It's not going to break the natural flow of the work and the mission at hand. That's oftentimes how I then start to prioritize and take the five, like in your example, and say, you know what, numbers 3 and 4 are, the consequences are actually not that big, but numbers 1, 2, and 5 of my list, the consequences are actually, relatively high. So let me focus on those first. I'll get to 3 and 4 later. Does that answer your question?
Aziz, does that answer your question?
Yes, thank you, sir. Thank you for the clarity. Thank you.
Absolutely. Thank you for the question.
All right. Any other questions?
Opening the chat to see if I
No?
missed any questions.
Yeah, let's look in the chat.
Let's see. Let's see any questions here. And no problem, Margot. I do it all the time. Where I join. So it's all good.
Right. Well, if there are no other questions, once again, we'd like to say thank you very much, Mr. Cedric Bandoh. That was very informative. I'm sure we've all picked up a thing or two that we can apply to our time management and prioritization strategies. Um, and thank you everyone for turning out today. We had a big turnout, 55, which
Wow.
is really good. Let's keep that up. Thank you so much. So keep on with the mentoring. Hope everything is going well with your mentees. And just one thing I wanted to add, a lot of people acknowledge the invitation by sending emails. You don't need to send an email to say that you're coming, because the inbox tends to fill up really quickly. So once you get your invitation, just note it on your calendar. You don't need to send an acknowledgement. Thank you, Mr. Cedric Bandoh. We really enjoyed your session. And like I said, we've learned so much, and it will help us manage our time more effectively. Thank you. If there are no more questions, we'll call it a day.
Awesome. Well, thank
All
you. I
right.
really appreciate the kind words and the time and attention. And again, thank you for all that you do as educators. You're making a big difference in the world, and I'm happy to just have had a little bit of a part in your journey and your program here. And I wish you all the best as you move forward.
Thank you. All right.
Thank you.
Okay then. Bye.
Take care, everyone.
Bye-bye.
Thanks so much.
Well, I
Bye,
think you can
everyone.
stop the recording. All right then. Bye. See you on Thursday's Black Belt session. Bye.
Bye. Thank you. Okay, this was fair.